Pastor Ezekiel was the pride of Living Grace Ministries, a small but rapidly growing Pentecostal church in the heart of New Dawn City. Known for his powerful sermons and alleged miracles, people traveled far and wide to witness his divine touch. Women especially admired him, claiming he had brought blessings into their lives. But beneath his holy facade, Pastor Ezekiel harbored a sinister secret. One Sunday morning, the congregation packed the church to witness what many called the miracle hour. Pastor Ezekiel prayed fervently over a woman who had been having the issue of blood for years. Moments later, the woman fell to her knees, shouting, "I am healed." The crowd erupted in cheers, praising God for his servant's anointing. No one knew the dark cost of those miracles. Among the congregants that day was Precious, a bright-eyed young lady new to the city. She had been invited by a friend and felt drawn to the pastor's charisma. Little did she know, her life was about to take a chilling turn. After the service, Pastor Ezekiel noticed Precious among the crowd and asked one of the ushers to bring her to his office. "You are highly favored by the Lord," he told her, his voice smooth and reassuring. Precious felt special and promised to attend more services. Over the weeks, Pastor Ezekiel grew unusually close to Precious, often calling her for private prayers. At first, she felt flattered but soon started noticing how uneasy she felt around him. The pastor's gaze lingered too long, and his prayers became more personal and invasive. One evening, after a midweek service, Pastor Ezekiel invited Precious to his office again. This time, his intentions became clear. "The Lord revealed to me that you need special deliverance," he said, locking the door behind him. Precious's heart raced as he approached her with a predatory smile. Precious's instincts screamed danger. As Pastor Ezekiel advanced, she mustered the courage to push past him and ran out of the office. Her heart pounded as she escaped into the night. The incident left her shaken, but she couldn't let it go. She confided in her best friend, Amoka, who advised her to stay silent, warning, "No one will believe you." But Precious couldn't ignore the pastor's predatory behavior. She decided to dig deeper, determined to uncover the truth. Her investigation would soon reveal horrors far beyond anything she could have imagined. Precious started attending church services more frequently, not out of devotion but to observe Pastor Ezekiel closely. She noticed he always seemed to target women who came to him with personal struggles, infertility, marital problems, or financial distress. Many of these women would later claim their lives had improved miraculously after private sessions with him. Determined to find answers, Precious befriended some of these women, posing as someone seeking spiritual guidance. She listened carefully to their stories and noticed a disturbing pattern. Each woman spoke of private prayers with Pastor Ezekiel, sessions that often included odd rituals and left them feeling drained afterward. One of the women, Sister Gloria, shared a chilling account. "I felt weak for days after his prayers," she said. "But he told me it was the Spirit working in me." Gloria's eyes filled with tears as she added, "Since then, I haven't been able to conceive." Precious's suspicions deepened. She realized these women were victims, but they didn't even know it. She decided to dig deeper, even if it meant putting herself at risk. Precious couldn't investigate alone. She needed someone who could help her without bias. She turned to her cousin Alex, a journalist known for exposing corruption. At first, Alex was skeptical. "A pastor doing this? Are you sure?" he asked. But when Precious shared the stories she had gathered, his curiosity was piqued. Together, they devised a plan. Alex would attend the church undercover while Precious continued gathering evidence. He would pose as a struggling businessman in need of spiritual intervention to get close to Pastor Ezekiel. The plan was dangerous. If Pastor Ezekiel discovered their intentions, the consequences could be dire. But Precious was determined. "We can't let him keep destroying lives," she told Alex. With her cousin's help, she felt a glimmer of hope that justice could be served. As Alex integrated himself into the church, he began noticing strange occurrences. During one prayer session, he saw Pastor Ezekiel's demeanor change. His voice deepened, and his eyes seemed to glow unnaturally. The congregants called it the manifestation of the Holy Spirit, but Alex felt an unexplainable dread. Meanwhile, Precious discovered something even more horrifying. While searching online for similar cases, she stumbled upon a forum where people shared stories about fake pastors using dark powers. One post mentioned rituals involving women's wombs to gain spiritual strength. The description matched what Precious had heard from the women at Living Grace Ministries. Alex's reports and Precious's findings painted a terrifying picture. Pastor Ezekiel wasn't just a predator, he was involved in something far darker. The stakes were higher than they had imagined, but they couldn't back down now. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. One evening, Alex pretended to need deliverance and requested a private session with Pastor Ezekiel. The pastor agreed and led him into a room behind the church altar. This room was off limits to everyone except the pastor himself. "This is where the Holy Spirit works best," Ezekiel said with a smile that sent chills down Alex's spine. As Alex looked around, he noticed strange objects, candles, mirrors, and jars filled with an unknown liquid. In the corner was a small altar adorned with symbols he didn't recognize. Pastor Ezekiel began his prayers, speaking in a language that didn't sound like any Alex had heard before. Alex pretended to be entranced, but his journalist instincts were in overdrive. He discreetly recorded the session using a hidden device in his pocket. When the session ended, Ezekiel placed his hand on Alex's shoulder and said, "Your breakthrough is near." Alex nodded, masking his fear with a smile. Armed with the recording, Alex and Precious decided it was time to confront some of the women who had been victims of Pastor Ezekiel's rituals. They met with Sister Gloria and a few others in a safe location, away from the church. When Alex played the recording, the women were horrified. "That's the same prayer he did for me," one of them whispered, her voice trembling. The women began to open up, sharing details they had kept hidden out of fear or shame. One woman revealed that after her sessions with the pastor, she had recurring nightmares of a shadowy figure taking something from her. Another confessed that she had felt physically weak ever since her last deliverance. Precious and Alex documented every story, building a case against Pastor Ezekiel. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that this was not just about deception, it was a horrifying abuse of power that had ruined lives. The next step was to gather irrefutable evidence to expose the pastor publicly. Precious's determination to uncover the full extent of Pastor Ezekiel's actions led her to break into the church late one night. She had noticed that the pastor often carried a small, locked box into his secret room. Convinced it contained crucial evidence, she decided to find out what was inside. With Alex standing guard outside, Precious slipped into the dark church. Using a flashlight, she navigated her way to the secret room. Her hands trembled as she picked the lock on the box. Inside, she found photographs, hair strands, and other personal items belonging to several women from the congregation. Before she could examine further, she heard footsteps approaching. Panicking, Precious hid behind a curtain. Pastor Ezekiel entered the room, muttering to himself. He seemed agitated, as though he sensed something was wrong. Precious held her breath, praying he wouldn't find her. When he finally left, Precious grabbed the box and fled. The contents of the box would become the key to unraveling Pastor Ezekiel's web of deceit. Precious and Alex carefully examined the contents of the box at his apartment. Each item told a story of manipulation and betrayal. There were photos of women, each marked with symbols Precious couldn't understand. Some items had dates and names written on them, likely indicating when and to whom the rituals were performed. Among the disturbing contents was a diary, written in Pastor Ezekiel's handwriting. Precious and Alex sat in stunned silence as they flipped through the pages of Pastor Ezekiel's diary. The entries detailed a chilling account of his manipulations. He described how he identified vulnerable women in the congregation and lured them into his web of deceit under the guise of offering spiritual help. The diary even mentioned specific rituals he performed to extract their spiritual essence, which he claimed fueled his miraculous powers. An entry caught Precious's attention, a description of an anchor ritual, which he performed on particularly powerful women to sustain his abilities. Precious realized with horror that some of the victims, including Sister Gloria, were permanently affected by these rituals. "We need to get this to the authorities," Alex said, but Precious hesitated. "If we are not careful, he'll destroy the evidence and come after us." They decided to make digital copies of the diary and photographs. With this damning evidence, they could build a strong case against the pastor. But as they walked, a nagging feeling crept into Precious's mind. Pastor Ezekiel wasn't just deceitful, he was dangerous. Their fight for justice had only begun. Precious and Alex decided to involve some of the victims in their plan. They approached Sister Gloria and a few others, sharing the evidence they had gathered. While some were willing to support them, others refused, too afraid of the repercussions. "He's a man of God," one woman insisted. "If we go against him, we'll bring a curse upon ourselves." Alex tried to reason with them. "This man is exploiting your faith for his gain," he argued, but their fear and devotion were too deeply ingrained. Precious realized that exposing Pastor Ezekiel would require not just evidence but also a way to break his psychological hold on the congregation. They decided to focus on building a core group of victims who were brave enough to testify. Precious's resolve hardened. "If we don't stop him, he'll keep ruining lives," she said. But as they prepared for the next step, they knew the pastor wouldn't go down without a fight. To gather more evidence, Precious and Alex devised a plan to catch Pastor Ezekiel in the act. Precious would pretend to seek special prayers from him, while Alex monitored the session using hidden cameras. It was a risky move, but they needed undeniable proof of his predatory behavior. Precious arranged a private meeting with the pastor, feigning desperation about a personal problem. Pastor Ezekiel welcomed her warmly, his eyes gleaming with predatory intent. "The Lord has shown me your burden," he said, leading her to the secret room. As the session began, Alex watched from a nearby van, his heart pounding. Through the camera feed, he saw Pastor Ezekiel place his hands on Precious's shoulders, muttering strange words. But before he could escalate the situation, Precious excused herself, claiming she needed to use the restroom. She left the room, leaving the pastor visibly frustrated. Although the plan didn't go as expected, the footage they captured revealed enough to raise suspicions. Precious and Alex knew they were getting closer to exposing the truth, but they also understood the pastor would grow more cautious. Pastor Ezekiel began to suspect someone was investigating him. He noticed Precious's increasing involvement in the church and how she frequently spoke with other women. "The devil is walking through someone in our midst," he warned during a sermon, his eyes scanning the congregation. "But the Lord will reveal them to me." Precious felt a chill as his gaze lingered on her for a moment too long. Alex advised her to lay low, but she refused. "If we stop now, he'll win," she said firmly. However, they both knew they had to tread carefully. That night, Precious's phone buzzed with an anonymous message, "Stop what you're doing, or you'll regret it." Fear gripped her, but she refused to back down. Instead, she and Alex doubled their efforts, reaching out to more victims and gathering additional evidence. The closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous their mission became. Precious decided to confront Pastor Ezekiel during a Sunday service. Armed with copies of the evidence, she stood up in the middle of his sermon. "Pastor, you have deceived us all," she declared, her voice shaking but resolute. The congregation gasped, their eyes darting between Precious and the bewildered pastor. "What nonsense is this?" Ezekiel bellowed, attempting to maintain his composure. But Precious pressed on, presenting photographs and excerpts from his diary. The congregation murmured in disbelief as the evidence painted a damning picture of their beloved pastor. "She's lying," Ezekiel shouted, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Alex stepped forward, adding, "We have recordings and testimonies from victims. You can't deny this anymore." The church erupted into chaos. Some members supported Precious, while others vehemently defended the pastor. Amid the commotion, Ezekiel attempted to leave, but a group of men blocked his path. For the first time, his facade of control began to crumble. Police officers arrived at the church shortly after the confrontation. Pastor Ezekiel was taken into custody for questioning, but the battle was far from over. His loyal supporters protested his arrest, accusing Precious and Alex of orchestrating a smear campaign. Meanwhile, the victims who had come forward faced backlash from friends and family. Precious felt a mix of relief and frustration. While Ezekiel was no longer free to harm anyone, she knew the fight for justice wasn't over. The legal process would be long and grueling, and the pastor's influence still loomed over the congregation. Determined to see the case through, Precious and Alex continued working with the authorities, providing evidence and coordinating with the victims. Their courage inspired others to come forward, strengthening the case against the disgraced pastor. But as the trial approached, they couldn't shake the feeling that Ezekiel still had tricks up his sleeve. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Pastor Ezekiel's trial began. Victims and their families filled the gallery, alongside church members who refused to believe the accusations. Precious and Alex sat near the front, their hearts pounding as the prosecutor presented the evidence. The diary, the recordings, and the testimonies of the victims painted a chilling picture of Pastor Ezekiel's exploitation. The defense, however, attempted to discredit the victims, claiming they were conspiring to destroy a man of God. Ezekiel himself maintained his innocence, proclaiming, "This is the work of the devil." Despite his theatrics, the evidence was overwhelming. Precious's testimony was particularly damning, as she recounted her near assault and the discoveries she and Alex had made. As she stepped down from the witness stand, she felt a surge of determination. Justice was finally within reach. As the trial progressed, Ezekiel's supporters grew increasingly hostile. Precious received threatening messages, and Alex's car was vandalized. It was clear that someone wanted to silence them. One night, Precious's apartment was broken into. Though nothing valuable was taken, the message was clear: back off. Precious refused to be intimidated, but the experience shook her. "We need to be more careful," Alex urged. They decided to stay together for safety, knowing the stakes were higher than ever. Meanwhile, the prosecution uncovered more evidence linking Ezekiel to financial fraud and illegal activities. The case against him grew stronger, but so did the resistance from his loyalists. Precious and Alex braced themselves for the next phase of the battle. The trial took its toll on the church. Some members accepted the truth and sought to support the victims, while others clung to their belief in Ezekiel's innocence. Fights broke out during services, and attendance dwindled. The once united congregation was now a fractured community. Precious's heart ached as she saw the damage Ezekiel had caused. "This isn't just about justice," she told Alex. "It's about healing the people he hurt." Alex nodded. "We'll get there," he said. "One step at a time." As the trial neared its conclusion, Precious and Alex focused on rallying support for the victims. They organized meetings and counseling sessions, helping the women find strength in their shared experiences. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the decision, guilty on all charges. Pastor Ezekiel's face twisted in rage as the sentence was announced, 25 years in prison. Cheers erupted from the victims and their supporters, while Ezekiel's loyalists sat in stunned silence. Precious felt a wave of relief and vindication. "We did it," she whispered to Alex. But the journey wasn't over. The victims still had a long road to recovery, and the community needed to heal. Precious and Alex vowed to continue their work, helping others rebuild their lives. With Ezekiel behind bars, the church struggled to rebuild. A new pastor was appointed, one who emphasized transparency and accountability. Precious and Alex continued to support the victims, helping them navigate their trauma and find closure. Sister Gloria, once one of Ezekiel's staunchest defenders, approached Precious with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for opening my eyes," she said. "I'll never forgive myself for what I let him do." "It's not your fault," Precious reassured her. "The best thing we can do now is move forward." Slowly but surely, the congregation began to heal. Precious and Alex found solace in knowing their efforts had made a difference, but they also knew the fight against exploitation and abuse was far from over. Inspired by their experiences, Precious and Alex decided to launch an organization dedicated to supporting victims of abuse and exposing predators in positions of power. They called it Voices of Justice. The organization quickly gained traction, attracting volunteers and donations. Precious and Alex worked tirelessly, driven by a shared passion for justice. Their efforts brought hope to countless individuals who had suffered in silence for too long. Despite the challenges, Precious felt a renewed sense of purpose. "We are making a difference," she told Alex. "One step at a time." News of Pastor Ezekiel's downfall spread far and wide, inspiring other victims to come forward. Churches across the region began implementing stricter policies to prevent abuse, and communities rallied around survivors. Precious and Alex received letters and messages from people they'd never met, thanking them for their bravery. "You've given us hope," one woman wrote. "Thank you for showing us that justice is possible." While the fight was far from over, Precious and Alex took comfort in knowing their actions had sparked change. They continued their work with unwavering determination, knowing the road ahead would be long but worthwhile. Precious and Alex discovered that someone within their organization, Voices of Justice, has been leaking sensitive information to Ezekiel's loyalists. This betrayal threatens to undermine their work and places victims at risk. After a tense investigation, the culprit is revealed to be a disgruntled former member seeking financial gain. With evidence in hand, Precious confronts the betrayer in a dramatic public meeting. The confrontation exposes the individual's actions and reinforces the organization's credibility. Despite the setback, Precious and Alex emerged stronger, redoubling their efforts to support victims. Pastor Ezekiel files an appeal, claiming he was framed and demanding a retrial. This news reignites tension in the community, with his loyalists becoming emboldened. Precious and Alex braced themselves for another legal battle, gathering new testimonies and evidence to counter Ezekiel's claims. During the appeal hearing, Ezekiel's defense presents manipulated evidence, but Precious and Alex's preparation pays off. New witnesses, including some of Ezekiel's former allies, testify against him. The judge upholds the original verdict, dashing Ezekiel's hopes of release. The community begins to reconcile its divisions. Precious and Alex lead efforts to foster understanding between victims and those who had supported Ezekiel. Support groups and counseling sessions flourish, helping many heal from the trauma. The church rebuilds its congregation with a focus on accountability and healing. Precious and Alex's organization gains nationwide recognition, inspiring similar initiatives across the country. They reflect on their journey and the lives they've touched, feeling proud of their accomplishments. Years later, Precious and Alex look back on their fight for justice as they prepare to pass the leadership of Voices of Justice to a new generation. Their work has created lasting change, ensuring that no predator like Ezekiel can thrive unchallenged. The story ends with hope, as Precious and Alex see a brighter future for their community and beyond. Thank you for watching till the end. Don't forget to support us by hitting the subscribe button, like, and share this video.